Hey, welcome back, everyone. So, listen, if you could use a little welcome break right now, we are about to give you the equivalent of a night out at a Newfoundland pub, because that is the sort of levity in Alan Doyle's brand new book, All Together Now, A Newfoundlander's Light Tales for Heavy Times. And in it, the prolific Canadian singer songwriter shares his hilarious stories from his life. And guess what? Alan Doyle joins us now. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Nice to see you all.
Hi, Alan. It's good to
Hey,
see
Lainey.
you again, too. And you have described this book as Tales from the Throne of a Bar Stool. Why did you write this book?
I've had this book in this project in the back of my mind for the longest time that I thought it would be make for an entertaining book or even like a one-man stage show or something where, I just present my side of a great night in the pub in St. John's and, which is usually filled with, all my crazy friends who are fighting hand over fist to get their story in before someone gets, starts one. And they're all fun and they're all a laugh and they're all just, really meant to be entertaining and funny. But the odd one has the odd lesson in it too, and I just thought it would be a fun thing to offer that in book form, especially during this pandemic where people are looking for a little bit of light during the darkness.
Hey, listen, you're a musician. You've spent the majority of your life on the road with your former band there, Great Big Sea, and the pandemic hit. Everyone's hunkered down. You're in St. John's right now. And I understand that for you and the entire team, this is the longest stretch of being hunkered down since 1994.
Yeah.
So what is pandemic like for someone who's used to being kind of nomadic? And are you creating music?
Yeah, I did a couple of fun projects, and the pandemic. You're right. It's a real hardship for the traveling, wandering, gig and gathering people like us, and it really. I mean, it gave us a chance. I think a lot of us to turn our attention to a few projects that we've always wanted to do, and I recorded this cool little EP here with. It's called Songs from Home. With some friends, the Once and the Ennis Sisters and Rachel Cousins and Fortunate Ones. And we did a cool project that over the internet. So we all just had home studios like I have here. And we all just sort of collaborated over the old internet and made a record in isolation. That was super fun. And then in the month of May, I turned my attention to this book, and it was really, this is what occupied most of my month of May. I would never have in the past spent that much time working on a writing project because normally my attention span doesn't allow me to do that. So but this was different, and it's been a very odd year for people like me. But I've been looking to find the blessings in it, and quite frankly, there's been quite a few.
Well, it's good to hear that you're doing okay, but we also have to check on Spencer and Pearl. Those are your dogs. And we've been hearing that the pandemic for dogs has meant that they're living their best lives. That is true of my two dogs, but what about yours?
Well, hold on now. Let me see if I can do this. I'm not the greatest photographer in the world, but I'm going to do my best for you. Here we go. Oh, let's see. There he is. That's his day right there. Not gonna lie to you. That's how it goes just about every day. He comes down here. He comes down here when I do it, and he listens for about 8 minutes, and then it's all well and good when you're doing music and you're making loud noises and stuff. But for the All Together Now, I recorded the audio book down here, right? So recording the audio book, there's nothing but a single voice on there. So you need like almost complete silence, right? And so how often did I have to just stop and start because all you could hear was Spencer snoring in the background? But he's been great company. He's been great company, and I must say, yeah.
And this is what you do so well. You are such a storyteller. And if you can regale us with one of the tales that you actually talk about in the book, and it is the tale surrounding your very first flight from Newfoundland to England. And I understand it involves a photo with a bird on the edge of the Thames. Can you give us a little snapshot of that really funny tale?
Yeah, it's one of the stories, kind of categories of stories in the book. Like there's lots of stories from my young life growing up in Petty Harbor, and stories from my professional life going around, in bands and in movies and stuff. And then there's the category of like the one you mentioned where we're growing into adulthood, being from a small town, we were always put in situations that were much more worldly than ours. And my first trip ever on an airplane was I left Petty Harbour, a town of 500 people, and I got my aunt to drive me to Torbay Airport, and I flew to London, England. And so other than St. John's, the first city I ever saw in my life was London. And it was just a complete, over the next week or two, me and my brother bombing around London and Dublin and a few places. It was just a complete culture shock, and you're constantly thrown into these situations that you weren't quite so hard to handle. And somewhere in the back of my mind too, I had it like that this was going to be my liberation kind of coming of age trip, where I would demonstrate to myself and everyone else that Alan Doyle of Petty Harbour was not just of Petty Harbour, that he was capable of so much more. And I wasn't about, to have a trip to England, be anything other than that. And then I met up with this fella who was, when I was really tired and I should have thought more of it, I met up with this guy who wanted to sell me photos of me with a bird on my head. And because I was so tired, I just did it. And then a few minutes later, I realized that the guy was having me on and just took my 20 pounds for nothing. And to make a long story short, and I'm trying my best here. I threatened him to give me my money back in my favorite, in my whatever bullish Petty Harbour way I could have conjured up as a 19-year-old, and he gave me back the money, and I just left him there and thought quite proud of myself. And then, of course, when I got home, what do you think showed up in the mail? 2 photos of me with a bird on my head below Big Ben. Yeah, and I was just like, oh my god. And yeah, it's true. And every time, I swear to God, every time I go back to London, I've been back dozens and dozens of times since. And every time I go back, I walk down that same part of the Thames. And of course, I've never seen that old Frenchman again. But I always give whoever's busking there, normally you give like £1 or like a few coins, whatever. I always give someone 20 pounds.
So listen, there's a great story in the book about you going grocery shopping with your son when he was a baby, and you're kind of getting funny looks from people around you. What is that story?
Again, that's like one of the categories of stories in there, of course, is that almost all the stories are self-deprecating in some fashion. And I insist that people know right away that this is not a retelling of my biggest moments, quite the opposite, or my biggest victories. It's quite the opposite. And like being a fella in a band who's well known or whatever, when you become a dad, makes being your parenthood slightly different, I think. And like one of the times I noticed that right away was, myself and my wife took our little fella Henry. He was just an infant into the grocery store, and he wanted to get in the big fire engine, or race car, plastic cart, and so we took it and popped him in there. But a couple of aisles into the 10-aisle supermarket, he got fussy, so my wife took him out to the car, and then so it was just Johnny Rockstar there walking around the supermarket with with the kid's cart, but no kid in it, and I had no idea how ridiculous that would have looked. I mean, if anyone was doing it, it'd look ridiculous. But then Johnny Longhair Rockstar is walking around the Sobeys with no kid in the fire engine car.
Your tales from your throne, your barstool throne, are always a treat. You are a treat. Thank you so much, Alan. All together now, his book is available right now. Our extended interview with Alan Doyle will be on our podcast. And Alan, if you could do us the honor of playing us to break.
Little Irish wedding waltz for us. Thanks so much for having me, everybody.